Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Pash On podcast. Let's get started with your host, Brian Pash.
Hi, this is Brian Pash, and welcome to another podcast. On today's show, we have a big topic to address: marketing in a cookieless world. I'm so glad to have Josh Goodin. He's one of the executives at Synchro, handling product marketing and strategy. And with DMSC coming up in July, man, this is going to be a big topic because dealers are really not prepared for the massive changes that are going to be happening. So let me welcome Josh to the show. Josh, thanks for taking the time to talk about this important topic today.
Absolutely, Brian. Thanks for having me.
You know, Josh, there's so much to cover in a short amount of time, but with the announcements that have been triggered by Apple's decision to clamp down, be a market leader in consumer privacy. At DMSC, we're going to talk about the impact of cookies going away and how this impacts dealer marketing. How would you explain it to a dealer? Is this a small change, a medium change, a big change, and why?
Yeah, Brian, I would say this is a huge change on that scale. We haven't seen a change this big since really the advent of the banner ad. The why behind it is this impacts retargeting, behavioral targeting, frequency tracking, reporting, costs, CPMs across the board.
And Josh, one of the things I was thinking is that so many data-driven audiences, so many data resellers have relied on for years this kind of free access to cookies. So let's start there. What's specifically changing where data resellers, audience builders, or dealers can't access cookies the way they once did?
Right. So this comes down to Apple, predominantly Apple and Google, making the decisions that within their browsers, they're no longer going to track third-party cookies. Third-party cookies just being essentially someone else's data. So I'm on Parade.com's website and I'm getting an ad for Amazon. Parade doesn't know that I went to Amazon and looked at band t-shirts, but Amazon does. And so that ability to target me is going to go away. The third-party cookie has been the foundation for what we've used for targeting realistically for the last 15 to 20 years.
You know, Justin, I think there's some confusion about retargeting. Dealers have told me, well, Brian, hold on. I own my website. If someone comes to my website and, shops, why can't I follow them? It's not about their website or their data. They just can't track that shopper as they jump around the internet anymore.
That's right. That's exactly right. Essentially, the browser itself will say, as soon as that person leaves your site and they go to someone else's site, it becomes someone else's data. And so they will delete the cookie. There's not even a policing mechanism that's needed because the browsers themselves will delete the cookies.
So if I shop at Zappos and I look at some sneakers, or Macy's, I look at some kitchenware, and I used to be followed by these dynamic banner ads, which would actually show little photos of the products I shop for, those go away?
They do. Yeah.
Now, what about somebody said to me the other day, and when I was doing a live cast, well, Brian, that's not true because the people who opt in to be tracked will still be able to, do retargeting for. How do you react to that type of statement?
Yeah, and whomever made that statement is completely correct. That's true. If someone opts in, more than likely Google and Apple are still going to allow that to happen. The preliminary data that's coming out of Apple, though, who has implemented some of these steps first, and out of Mozilla, who owns Firefox, suggests that at best it's going to be about 10% of audiences, and more realistically, it may be below 1%. So while it's true, it only represents 1% of the potential open web audience.
So let's take this a little deeper, Josh. Dealers for years have been using subdomains and iframes to bolt on different products. For example, X-Time as an iframe. This was basically implemented years ago because dealers' websites were not secure. X-Time needed to be secure. They iframed it. Dealer Track with a finance application. And let's just say Roadster, who wants a different digital retailing experience, bolts on a subdomain. So currently, if I run a Google Ads campaign for service and they click on my ad and they come to my website, I can see basically through the iframe because X-Time is going to throw an event if I book an appointment and associate it with that session. Does that go away?
That is open for debate. We're as yet unsure on a lot of these topics. Just to be clear, for anybody that would tell you that they've got it all figured out, Google says very plainly in their own documentation, they don't have it figured out. And they represent 64% of the open web traffic. So there are a lot of questions. There are a lot more questions than there are answers at this point. And that's one of the questions. One of the things that we do know about the iframe, however, is just taking X-Time because you brought it up. It's a double frame in. And we know that it's already breaking within some early adopters within the iOS 14.5 from Apple, because it is a separate domain. And because they're two independent domains, it deletes the cookie. So you start a service scheduling process, or you start looking for tires and you've selected your make model, and then you transition to the next frame, it won't keep the data.
Wow. That's a huge impact because we have so many iframed applications. Even, Josh, isn't it true some of the digital retailing tools kind of act like an iframe on the dealer's website, even though the dealer might not see it as that?
Some of them do, yes.
So we're going to have some challenges in building retargeting. What about dealer groups who have, let's just say, benefited from tracking consumers on their own websites or website group, seeing some cross-shopping data? Does that go away too?
Depends on how you have your domaining structure set up. If you've subdomained, so joshschevy.com or joshschevy.com versus joshsford.com, the answer is no. However, if it's ford.joshsdealergroup.com and chevy.joshsdealergroup.com, the answer is probably yes. Because of the way the subdomaining structure works, it considers it under the same heading, and thus it will allow the passage of cookies back and forth between the subdomains. But if you're using separate URL strings for each of your sites, you can expect any cross-shopping behavior to not carry between those sites.
Well, that's the majority of dealers, right? By OEM guidelines, they do not want the subdomains. But that is good news, though, theoretically for Roadster, because when Roadster sets up, at least for our clients, we set up analytics tracking across both the main domain and the subdomain. So we see the traffic as if it's one website. So that cookie path or the event tracking path, showing it as a single session, that would be good for Roadster then.
It would. And there are definitely going to be companies who have set up their structure in such a way that they benefit from these changes. Or rather, there will be companies who see significant detriment as a result of this, and ones who don't really see a whole lot of impact. And so the ones that don't see impact are going to offer a compelling advantage over the ones that do.
This brings up a very interesting conversation I had with an Audi executive and one of their dealers. The dealer wanted to install Roadster as a subdomain, but Audi doesn't support the subdomain today. They just want the Roadster overlay. But with this technology change, this could be a massive case for Audi dealers to bring up to Audi to say, hey, listen, using the subdomain experience is going to allow me to have more data, better tracking, and a unified consumer experience between the website and Roadster.
Without a doubt. Absolutely.
Wow. Okay. So this topic is going to be addressed in multiple ways at DMSC. We know that there's impacts to the Google advertising, impact to Facebook advertising. Obviously, this is, well, going to require people to really trust industry leaders because it's changing very quickly. For the dealers that are listening, what's your advice, for them to keep up with these updates, other than listening to the podcast, other than coming out to DMSC? Because I'm going to assume this next year is going to have a lot of peaks and valleys of information and misinformation.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I would encourage you to push on your vendors. These guys really need to be talking to you about what they're doing about cookieless, what their technology is going to look like in the future as a result of it, what their reporting is going to look like. I mean, guys, you may see costs, your KPI costs double, triple, maybe add a zero after it. So you need to find someone you trust that you can consistently listen to, that's consistently talking about this. There is probably a dozen articles a day that come out by really relevant folks talking about this, and you need somebody to consolidate that for you. That's first and foremost. You need to find somebody that you trust to give you updates so that you don't have to read all dozen articles every single day. We've had 3 major changes to this landscape in the last 4 weeks alone.
Well, I think that is extremely important. I mean, Syncro is one of the largest advertisers for dealers at Tier 3, probably managing around $50 million in Google spend. This is a huge impact for the dealers who are listening here. Josh is in the epicenter of this storm, trying to really come out with a roadmap for dealers who still want to have more targeted audiences, don't want to have to spray and pray, don't want 2x to 5x per lead cost. But for a lot of people who are not careful, that's exactly what's going to happen. So Josh, what are you recommending or telling the Syncro dealers about how you're going to prepare them for this new future?
Absolutely. So there's a few things, right? And this may take me just a second to sort of run through. The first thing that we're doing is speaking about this on a regular basis, right? We're being very transparent with what we're working on. We're being very transparent with what's going on. We just hosted a webinar last week. We'll continue every 4 to 6 weeks to host another one where you can bring your questions. It's an open office hours where we'll update you on what's changed since the last time we talked and take your questions about these topics. But at our heart, we solve problems with technology. We've got over 200 engineers. We've got 14 patents on record. So the solution to this particular problem for everybody is going to be a mix of getting inside of what are these called walled gardens: Facebook, Google, Verizon Media, people you've never heard of. And that's exactly what we're doing, is we're building or have already built all the integrations to keep our dealers in those walled gardens using their first party data. And that's the second part. Get tight on your data now. Know who owns your Google Analytics account.
Yes.
Understand GA4. Like I can't stress this enough. And your SEO. Those are the things you have to do right now so that you're ready when this happens.
Yeah, and I want to also do a little tease for our opening DMSC panel on Sunday night. So the conference is half day on Sunday, all day Monday and Tuesday. I'm going to open with a panel discussion on generating more sales opportunities from Google SEM. Josh, I'm going to have you both on the cookieless future and this panel because there's a lot of money being spent on Google advertising and dealers aren't really looking at the outcome. And I've partnered with CallSource, Interactive Tell, Call Review, and Car Wars to do a roll-up of all the phone calls associated with Google ad spend to really challenge dealers right now, especially as these changes are coming, understand what your ad campaigns are generating, understand what's going to change, and really take ownership of your data? Josh, as a general idea of the 50 million in Google spend that you guys are managing, what percent of that spend is for sales versus service?
Almost all of it's in sales.
So,
like almost 100%. You get a couple of percentage points there associated with service, but most of it's sales centered.
Okay, so let's say 98% of the dealer spend is for sales. We're going to have a breakthrough discussion, because when you look at the conversions today, and one huge problem is most ad agencies don't know how to set up conversion goals for the digital retailing tools that are on dealer websites. But let's just say they are a forward-thinking agency. They've set up goals for chat and text. They set up goals for digital retailing. They set up goals for the website forms. They've set up goals for, mobile click to call and desktop calls if they have DNI. The number one conversion channel is the phone. And when you listen to the outcomes of these sales campaigns, 80+% are for service. And here's what I found. It's because dealers are following a playbook and not listening to the outcomes of those phone calls. And we're going to have a breakthrough case study that I'm working on to show dealers how to make some changes to their Google ad strategy to get more sales opportunities for those dollars and let the service calls come in for free. This is even more important and pressing now, Josh, because with these changes in tracking, dealers are going to have to pay more to get a consumer through paid search to get back to their website.
That's absolutely true. Yeah, we talked to a very large dealer group last week, one of the biggest in the country, and their expectation for SEM cost per click, is a 50% increase as a result of all this.
Wow. Well, it is going to be an amazing conference. It's an amazing time to talk about that. Sunday night, we're going to be talking about breakthrough ways to improve Google outcomes for sales. And then on Monday morning, Josh, I have you on the panel, Marketing in a Cookieless World. But then we also have Sarah is going to be talking about Facebook marketing and the changes that are going on Facebook. Josh, Facebook's doing more to keep consumers on the Facebook ecosystem, right? With their own equivalent VDPs, with their own messaging. Do you think Facebook saw the writing on the wall and they realized that they needed, in effect, to create a shopping environment for auto dealers within their platform, knowing that a lot of the data, once they leave the platform, is lost?
Absolutely. I mean, Facebook is very smart. Google doing very much the same thing, trying to keep people in their ecosystems. That's what those walled gardens are. The longer they can keep you in the walled garden, the more they can reach you, the more influence they have. So yes, Facebook saw the writing on the wall and got ahead of the curve. Their conversion API, there's some really interesting stuff that Facebook is doing, and you need a partner that's going to be able to connect you right into that.
Josh, I heard from another dealer that they're involved in a pilot where Google's doing kind of inventory ads in spot zero, like right at the top of search. And I'm wondering now, is this the same thing where Google's going to start not doing the Google Cars thing, but allowing consumers to engage in ads, look at VDPs, but keep them in the Google ecosystem? Are we seeing that? Have you heard about those new kind of inventory ads in position zero?
Yes, I have. And that's exactly why Google is doing it. The industry's firing back a little bit at Google on this front. WordPress came out this very weekend and said, hey, we're not actually going to support Google's replacement for the cookie. It's called FLoC, Federated Learning of Cohorts. It sounds like a bad Marvel name, but it's absolutely, it being Google here, is absolutely going to try to keep people in their ecosystem, because as soon as someone leaves the Google ecosystem, you have WordPress saying, well, you're not going to be able to use our data. So the more they can keep people in, the more they can use the data, the more they can target, the more they can charge. So yes, without a doubt, that's exactly what Google is doing.
Well, for the dealers who are listening to today's podcast, I want to encourage you. Look, we've been locked up for 14 plus months. It's time to get out with your colleagues and get out to DMSC. DMSC this year is going to sell out like it has in pre-COVID years. We will be there July 11th, 12th, and 13th. The conference starts on Sunday afternoon, but on Sunday morning, we are going to offer 4 certification courses, 4-hour courses, one on digital retailing, one on video marketing, one on brand building, led by Paul Daly, great leader at Congruent, and a certification course on social media advertising. That's a bonus for dealers who come in on Saturday. And then we have 2.5 days of amazing content. But most of all, I will tell you that this one topic of the massive changes that are going on in digital marketing need to be passed down to the dealer community. And what better place than the Digital Marketing Strategies Conference? Everything's going to be turned upside down. Josh, before we wrap up today's conversation, let me ask you a question. For the dealers that are listening here, what's one thing you would tell dealers as a reason to get out, to spend some time with you, to really understand these changes? Why is it important now? Why is it important for them to be part of this active conversation?
Napa's an awesome venue for this meeting. I don't think that's what you're looking for.
That too,
though.
Yes, that too.
I would say, because not to minimize what we've been doing, guys, but we as advertisers, as marketers across industries have, to a great degree, been mailing it in for the last 20 years. You have to be involved in your marketing strategy going forward if you want to continue to reach and especially influence customers. You need to understand what's happening and make a plan for it. So that's why I would absolutely say you need to be there.
Well, listen, the smartest people in automotive digital marketing will be there. We have great workshops on SEO, digital retailing, messaging, and marketing. We're going to be talking about GA4. We have Colleen Harris from Synchro doing a great workshop on understanding GA4. We're going to be talking about video advertising. We have the teams from Effective and Spectrum there. We're going to talk about data-driven marketing outcomes. We got Rusty from MarketScan. Listen, there's so many different value propositions for dealers who want to stay ahead of the curve. And it's time to get out and to network with our colleagues. If this is the first time you're listening to this podcast, you should know that there are dozens of other episodes, interviews with industry leaders, disruptors, and thought leaders that are helping automotive retail move forward. So take time to look at the past episodes on the Apple Podcast channel, Google Play, SoundCloud, or the native platform, Libsyn. You can just go to brianpash.libsyn.com. And if you want to sign up for the conference, just go to digitalmarketingstrategies.org. Josh, I want to thank you for your time today. And I want to thank all the dealers listening to the podcast for their investment in their day to spend with us. And don't forget to share this podcast with your colleagues. Until next time, have a great day, and we hope to see you in the Napa Valley.